Hey, friends, and welcome back to the Midlife Edit, where we believe that midlife isn't a crisis, it's a comeback tour. Today's guest is truly somebody special, and not just because of who he is, but because he's making history here as my first ever male guest. He's a fellow podcaster, the voice of Chuck E. Cheese, the front man in Love Handle from Phineas from Ferb, and the lead singer of one of my all-time favorite bands, Bowling for Soup. But beyond the music, he's a husband, a father, a mental health advocate, and he sits on the board of Punk Rock Saves Lives. He's funny, he's truly relatable, he's humble, and honestly, he's one of the nicest humans I've ever had the pleasure of talking with. So grab your coffee, turn up the volume, and sit back and listen to my conversation with the one and only Jaret Reddick. Guys, I'm so stoked to say this, but Jaret Reddick, welcome to the Midlife Edit.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
I am so excited to have you here, and I'm just going to get it out of the way. Been a Bowling for Soup fan since high school. I'm from a small town in Pennsylvania, but the pop punk scene was kind of coming up, and we were listening to bands at random places in St. Leo's, just covering songs, and it's just been a fun ride since. So I'm really excited to have you here, and I was so excited to see you at the Four Chords Music Festival. That was my first time seeing your band, and how fun!
Oh, thank you. Well, we certainly do have a lot of fun. I think a big part of our band is that I think we're very lucky in that we're probably having more fun than most people in the audience.
Yeah.
And I think that shows. I think, the audience can usually tell that things are, when someone's up there just going through the motions, so yeah, we have a lot of fun, and the Four Chord Festival is so rad. And it's a friend of ours, Rishi Ball, who's been doing that now for 11 years, and it was such a pleasure to finally be a part of it.
That's so awesome. And I reached out because it was the first time I heard Turbulence, actually.
Oh yeah,
And
right.
my podcast is all geared towards midlife edit, and how I call it, it's not a crisis. I hate that word. It's a time to edit our lives and just kind of figure out who we are. But I really talk a lot about mental health. And that
Yeah,
song, the chills and the tears, and my husband looked at me and was like, "Wow, that really hit you." And I was like, "It did." So I was like, "Hey, let's talk to Jaret and see if he would be the first male guest on my podcast." So I'm so excited to have you here, and I really want to talk about mental health because you're such an advocate for it. And I've watched a lot of videos. I've read a couple interviews that you did, and just how much you've talked about this as a man has really been amazing, because we grew up in the era where men weren't allowed to talk about it, and it was be tough and don't cry and just be a man. So I kind
yeah.
of wanted to get your opinion on that, and why you've been such a big mental health advocate.
Well, first of all, let me just say thank you for that. It's interesting. That entire thing makes me so happy because, to be honest, Turbulence isn't something that we have been doing at that type of show. Normally when we play festivals and that kind of thing, historically, and until literally the last few months, we haven't done that song because we kind of just try and keep the energy level at 107, and but we had just come off tour with Simple Plan, and we're doing that song each night in a 30-minute set, or 40-minute set, and it was working and it was connecting. And so we were just like, this is a pop punk festival. There's gonna everybody else is gonna just bring the high energy stuff. Let's just see what happens and try it. And so just I saw people with some tears, and the fact that the charity that I work with so closely, Punk Rock Saves Lives, was there. It's a benefit because it allows me to say something about them before I do the song and all of that. So I'm very, very glad that's how we connected, because that does show me that doing that song, is making a difference. And if I take that moment during a show and connect with, one person who has been struggling and they can take my words or my experience and reach out for help for the first time, then it's worth everybody else sitting through the song. So but yeah, we're men are historically taught to rub some dirt on it and get back in there, and our I'm 53, so I would imagine that I'm around the listing age of some of your people, and them being female, that of course they're aware that our dads for the most part went to work, and they came home and they ate dinner, and then they sat in their chair and watched TV, and then they got up in the morning and they did the same thing, and they mowed the lawn on weekends, or if they were like my dad, they made us mow the lawn on weekends, and that was just that. um I really actually never thought about this until just now, but I guess I heard my parents talk about not necessarily feelings, but at least weakness and things like that, because I grew up in Alcoholics Anonymous family. So my parents were both in AA, and I guess they're not anonymous anymore. But yeah, uh, and so that world of Alateen and Al-Anon, and being able to talk about your experience or whatever, was something that was ingrained into me pretty early. But mental health struggles were not something that were even in my experience. I never really experienced. I experienced anxiety from the point of the only way that I can describe it is that when your parents are still paying for your insurance and you pass a cop going 80 miles an hour, like that is the only like real times in my life that I remember feeling something similar to what anxiety feels like. But that's just this passing feeling that goes away if you don't get pulled over. um and definitely depression was something that I was confused about. I think until my adulthood, depression just meant sad, and that's not at all what my experience with depression has been. Though it can be part of it. But my experience started fairly late in life. And in fact, I think I was almost 40 before I started to have any sort of issues. And, it sort of equates to a time in my life where a lot of things were happening. Divorce, fighting over custody for my two kids at the time, who were around 9 and 6. Um, you know, uh, moving to a new city, losing that family home, uh, and moving to a new city, starting a new relationship, all in this span of this few years, and then having another child, and getting a new home, and losing my in-laws and all of that, and then gaining new in-laws, and um those things are the things that I didn't realize, were going on all at the same time, of me being, for the very first time in my life, just not able to function. I'm the literal happiest person I've ever met. And in social settings, I was able to pretty much mask everything. So my band didn't know what was going on, my friends didn't know what was going on. I hid everything really, really well, but behind closed doors, I was in the fetal position the majority of the time. I could get my kids to school, get my dog fed, and then I was just kind of worthless from there. And that lasted for a few years, and I started to break my band up, and I I, I just I was just not functioning at the right level, making good decisions and all of that. And I stopped moving, so I started gaining weight. And so in the gaining of the weight, that made me again start, just kind of added on to these feelings of sort of hopelessness, and non-motivation. But I was really lucky. I had a really great medical doctor at the time. And I just answered a couple of questions just before mental health screening was normal.
Yeah.
Um, but he just was sort of asking me. He knew what I did for a living and was asking me about the creative aspect of things or whatever. And I just kind of started to go down the path of starting to share a few things that were happening with me. And at first it was just, what seemed to be maybe anxiety or whatever. And I also started with a therapist at the time. And then, but this doctor was really great in that, just explained to me how, because I didn't want to take medicine. And he explained to me, why medication's important and there's no magic pill. And I started down that path of all things. But the main thing that he said to me is, I listed all of those things that I just listed to you guys here just a second ago that were going on in my life. And he said, any one of those things can cause someone to just literally spiral into a funk that they could never get out of. Anyone. And he goes, you just did them all at the same time, and now you're breaking up your band. And, we're into 2013 at this point, and, I'm doing everything I can to try and save this marriage that's done and try to be able to wake up in the same house as my kids every day. And, any and all things I can do. I realize I'm a little bit all over the place, but this will eventually all these roads meet. So I started to basically, I was just like, okay, I'll try whatever. And so, went through all of the medications, Prozac, Wellbutrin, and all of the things. And, and I had to learn again that there's no magic pill, all the same while going to a psychologist or whatever. So yeah, late in life, get diagnosed with, pretty crazy depression, and what I would consider to be crippling anxiety. And all of a sudden I went from the hardest working person that, people would go like, you're the hardest working person I've ever met. And I, prided myself on that, to literally just existing. And, it was a scary time, it was, and so much like many, I think, at the time there's a stigma attached to it. I think we all sort of shied away from communicating about it too much, because you just never know how anybody's going to react. If you're like, yeah, I got depression or whatever, they're like, well, okay, well, cheer up, go do your stuff. So yeah, I kind of went through all that on my own. My wife, who I'm still with, this, my new Casey, was with me through that struggle, really encouraging me to go to therapy and to start down this path. But yeah, I, over a few year period, got myself to where I was functioning, better, and things started to come back together for the band, and, life settled down, and we ended up in a nice pattern with my ex-wife as far as the children were concerned. And so, life took on a normal existence again. But I still, to this day, have to maintain and take my medicine, and I see a therapist, and we go to couples counseling for maintenance, and I have a psychiatrist, and I and I talk to my doctor about everything, and it's one of those things. But my story on how I became so open about it, and is that there was a guy here in Dallas who, he's a singer for a band, but he's also a psychologist. And he was doing a series on Facebook called Louder Than Stigma. And he was just, reached out, open thing to anybody who had any sort of like mental health stuff happen in their lives, or, any problems. And I was just like, man, I don't know if I really want to talk about this. I'm in the funny band, like it's just the same as like really why I don't talk about it in my personal life at the time. But I went and I did this interview, and man, did it feel good. I mean, it was just like, oh my God, like I can only equate it to like that first time that therapy clicks, and like now I walk out of therapy and I never want to go. And on the way there, I think about 100 ways to cancel. And, you can't use car trouble every time. And then you go and then you walk out and you're just like, oh my God, am I glad I went to that, And so that was the beginning of me starting to talk about it. Well, when that article came out, I actually hit my publicists up. I have at the time a US one and a UK one. My UK publicist is still with me, by the way. And I said, hey, there's going to be this article come out, and it's going to talk about my struggles with mental health. But I don't necessarily want to talk about this all the time. Like I don't know that I want this to be this whole thing where like I just end up now this is what I talk about, and then people are going to come at me going, oh, the funny guy got successful and now he's depressed. Oh, you gained weight, you're just depressed now, right? Okay, well, whatever. And that, honestly, what I thought would happen. Thus being very interesting that Louder Than Stigma was, the name of this thing that I had done, because, that seems to be sort of a stigma that I think musicians all, have had in the past too. Like, oh man, I'm not going to talk about that. I need to be a rock star. I need to be bigger than life. I need them to, oh, sure. If I'm going to have any problems, it needs to be drugs because I jumped off a building into a pool and it was crazy, but I didn't do drugs, so I didn't have that. So yeah, at first I was just like, I really don't want this to be like my existence. I don't want this to be what people ask me about or my identity. Well, you fast forward a couple of months and the messages start coming in, and all of a sudden, one publication does sort of pick up on it, and then I get asked about it, and then the messages keep coming in. And I realized really quick, within just a few months that, hey, I think I have to talk about this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just had 3 people tell me that they went to therapy because they read this article. And now it's not people saying that my song saved their life. They're saying that these words that I spoke saved their life. And now, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's weird to sit here and say to you that because I talked about mental health, there are people who did not end their life.
Mm-hmm.
That's wild to me. And it's another aspect of all this that I really had to cope to I don't know if cope is to accept, because that's a lot of responsibility. But what I realized was it's not necessarily my responsibility, but if I'm able to do this and to share my story and to put these words out there and to show people that, hey man, if it can happen to me, the happiest guy I know, it can literally happen to anybody, and you're not alone. And those feelings that you have are legitimate. And just because everybody around you doesn't understand it doesn't make it any less of something that you have to deal with, like, and so thus the journey began. And here we are many years later, and I'm very involved with several charities. Punk Rock Saves Lives is the main one. And then I've got a few others. Foundation 45 here in Dallas is now the one that the Louder Than Stigma guy started. And then one that I'm starting to finally work with, one in the UK called Tough Enough to Care. And but yes, this is my long-winded answer to your very first question, saying that, yeah, I mean, I came from the rub some dirt on it space, and made it out of there, and now I scream it from the rooftops. And I should say that, did those messages come in? Did the people comment on my? Did I get an email? Did I get of like, oh, the fat guy is depressed now, or this guy blah 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 or whatever? Yeah, I got a few of them. But it's funny how when people are talking about my music, that those voices are the loudest ones, the ones that are like, you guys are terrible, and then everybody else is. But with the mental health stuff, whatever. That's just a miserable person, just really trying to take the rug out of somebody that's just trying to do the best they can,
I think it's so beautiful because a lot of times when people think about mental health, they think, oh, well, it's only somebody who has always been miserable all their lives and is unsuccessful. I have a beautiful life. I love my life so very much, but I've gone down deep, dark paths. I had a father with mental health issues. I have a 20-year-old who has mental health issues. And I think it's really important that we talk about, and you said it, I think in one of your videos not too long ago, and it is cliche, but it's okay not to be okay.
Yeah.
And giving other people permission, especially with your voice and who you are in the world, is so important because it makes them feel like it's okay. Um, and it's just, I think it's beautiful. And I also think, especially for men around your age. So I have a blended family. My husband came to me with 4 children, but we don't talk enough. I talk a lot about women and how we have a lot of burdens on us and things are hard. We don't talk enough about how it's hard for men, especially men in your situation and my husband's situation who has gone through a divorce but has fought for their children and to see them and is it's hard and it's sad that you can't have your children underneath your roof, 7 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about single moms. I don't think we talk enough about the single dads and how tough it is for them. So for you coming out to say that is really important. But my question for you is for people like me who have people that I love who are men going through this space, how can I help support them?
I think I think listening is important. I think the biggest the biggest thing that my wife did for me was do her own work, and she had to learn that if I'm having a low tide, like it's not, I can't explain why. So,
Mm-hmm.
and it is so hard. It's so hard to be on the other side. She wouldn't care that I say that she also has some mental health stuff. And I am a fixer. And so I think probably a lot of people in your situation, or especially women who are doting on their husbands and who love their husbands so much no matter what, and you want to fix it. You just want everything to be all right. You're like, okay, what can I make your favorite dinner? Can I, whatever. And I don't I mean, draw you a bath. I do anything. Can I pick up the kids today? Whatever. What can I do to help to make you like? I think a lot of times it helps if you just understand that there's nothing you can do, and it's not you. It's not your problem. It's my problem. And I have, and what husbands can do is learn to communicate that, and so I don't blame, you know, loved ones for not necessarily understanding, because even my band doesn't always get it. I mean, they try, but if they're like, they can tell, you can tell when I'm in a low tide or whatever. Unless you're just, somebody, if you come up to me in the airport and want to take a picture with me, you are never going to know
Right.
that I'm crawling out of my skin. That's just, and you shouldn't know that. But, my band see the real me. They see me wake up in the morning, and they see sometimes, and they're fewer and far between these days. But when I'm on a low tide, it'll be like, hey man, you all right? Yeah, I'm good. Did something happen? No, nothing happened. I'm just, anxious and, blah, blah, blah. But it's hard for loved ones to understand that they can't just fix it. But I think that's been a big thing for us, is that I can just say, hey, I just want you to know that I do not feel right today, that something is off balance. Nothing has happened. I mean, everything is fine at work. You're great. I'm not upset about anything. I just, I don't feel, it's one of those days, it's one of those weeks. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's one of those months. And that's a big one. And I think just also listening, encouraging communication. Do you want to talk about it? No. Well, if you do later, I'm here. If you don't, that's fine. And if something does come up, do you mind if I check in with you a little bit later, or if that is that annoying? Uh, that kind of stuff for me as somebody who has 10,000 things going on, because I am a not only self-diagnosed, but a diagnosed by everybody around me workaholic. My job is my passion, and I don't have any hobbies. My hobbies are making TikTok videos and singing songs and making people laugh, and I never stop. If I'm on my phone and you think I'm playing a game, I'm working on merch for the next tour. Like, that's how I am. And so, it's I think it can be it's harder on me when I'm not productive. It makes it worse. So,
Yeah.
even, these I kind of have been I'm not in a weird state or anything right now or having any issues or whatever, but I have just been real tired from tour or whatever. And so I like have to continue to give myself grace and say, hey man, you know what? It's okay. You are in your mid 50s and almost. And, you did just fly to 2 different cities in 4 days and play this show and do this and, and ride in a van for 5 hours. And, but yeah, I think that's a big one for us is just that sort of communication, that whole like realizing that it's not you, because, quite frankly, to put it simply, if let's say that if someone in my life is like, hey, what's wrong? You know, and I'm like, nothing. I'm feeling a little anxious, or I'm just a little off today or whatever. And then well, can I fix it? And when I start to see that it's affecting them,
Mm-hmm.
that they can't do anything to fix it, or that they think it's them, then that just makes it worse.
Yep.
And it's just this never ending cycle. And then you've got, especially if you're a couple and this, like, let's say this happens in the car. Now you've got 2 people doing the thing where they're thinking in their heads about like, well, okay, I guess I don't know what he's mad about, but and he's over there going, I wish I could just explain this, but I don't want her to be upset, and so communication is just so important. And it's so hard. So hard.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I think too, I mean, my husband, he's 50, I'm 42, but the tiredness of it all, like you were saying about how you're traveling all the time. We went to that festival and I swear to you, like I could have slept for 3 days, so I don't know how you do it.
Right.
But
Yeah.
the communication piece is something that I've learned as I've gotten older, and I think he has too, where sometimes we're not 50-50. Sometimes I need to be the 80 and sometimes he needs to be, So I love that you talk so openly about your family and about Casey, because I've heard her name and the stories about how she didn't like you because you didn't talk to her at first when
That's
I
so I don't talk, and that's the thing about me that's very, very strange, because I am a very outgoing person. But in social settings, sometimes, especially like getting a haircut or at the dentist, or like even like I don't like to talk to people at stores. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? It's a source of anxiety for me, and so yes, I was very quiet. I'm the first client she ever had that she would like put the color on my hair and go sit in the break room and not sit there and talk to me.
I think that's so great. And, I love that you have such a great relationship, but also with your children. And I know that it can be very hard for a parent who is going through mental health struggles.
Mm.
My father, like I said, I've had it. My son has it. It's very hard to communicate sometimes, especially when your children are growing older. You have 2 boys and a girl.
Yes.
And is it different when you talk to them? Male versus female, I guess, or maybe have you ever caught yourself like when you're raising them, like, the little girl falls off the bike and oh my gosh, that's the worst thing in the world for a dad, right? But the boy does, and you're like, get up, come on, Junior, like,
Yeah.
how have you kind of dealt with this whole transition in your 40s and midlife and mental health and raising children?
It's so funny that you say that, because it's something that I talk about this, with my friends who I'm, for whatever reason, my ex and I were the first ones to have kids in like all of our groups. So like most of my friends have little kids now, and or they're like me and their kids are my, so just to clarify, my daughter is 22, my son is 19, and my youngest son is 13, just turned 13. And so, yeah, I mean, that exists. Certainly, when my little girl was born, yes, I mean, she skinned her knee. It was the end of the world. I mean, just because there is something about a little girl, um, you just can't explain it as a dad. I mean, it is just, I just thought I was meant to be a girl dad. I was so surprised when we found out Jack was a boy. I was just like, I don't know if God got the memo on this one. You know what I mean? Like, I think this is pretty weird. I'm a girl dad, you know, and and so but yeah, you know, you sort of you freak out if the dog knocks the girl over, but when your son is running through the yard, you just with everything in you want to pick up a ball and take his feet from out from under him. You know, like it's just you can't help it. You're just like I want to squirt him in the face with a water gun so bad, you know, and it's just this, you know, this unspoken thing, and so. But you know, when it comes to them being sick or really hurt or going through something in their life or you know needing me, there's no difference.
Yeah.
You know, I don't you know I again I you know my little girl is 22 and she can still flutter those eyes and say daddy, and I am not, I admit it. I mean, she can literally have anything she wants. You know, and then my son, you know, he gets a few questions here and there, you know, about what it is he's doing. And then my youngest has a superpower too, where he, you know, so they've all got their ways to handle and to get me to get on whatever side of me they want to get. But yeah, the one thing about me is that since I'm public about everything, you know, they're well aware
Mhm.
of my struggles, and they're well aware of when they started, and they're well aware. My two oldest are well aware that you know a lot of what was really hard for me was you know again not seeing them in the mornings, or you know the weekends they or the weeks that they when they got older they didn't want to come here, you know, because their friends lived over by their mom, or you know those things were really 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 hard, but I navigated it as best I could. I took the high road in every single aspect that I could, and they're knowledgeable of it, you know, and they're very appreciative of that, you know, and I'm not trying to make myself some kind of hero dad. I just, you know, I wanted to make sure that they knew that I was there at all times, but I was never going to make them, you know, love me or be here or, you know, any of that. And so that was hard. And, you know, it was hard too because you've got, you know, my Casey, you know, going, why aren't they coming this week? You know, and they don't want to come this week. They're going to be, well, but this, you know, this is your week. They should be here, but I know, but I'm not going to make them, you know, it's coming. I'm a little bit off topic, but the point is that I'm very open with all of them about mental health. My youngest goes to counseling and loves it. I mean, he gets stoked to go because he's got just this, you know, it's that kind where like, you know, they go out and shoot baskets and sort of talk while they're doing that or whatever, and he can share any and everything with him, and you know, he's got his own story and his own path, and you know, but we're very encouraging. We try and encourage all of our kids to go to therapy, not just when things are bad, but when things are good,
Mhm.
you know. And you know, I encourage everybody listening to this to go. If you've never gone, you should go because it's the best.
100%. I say it all the time. And I say too, you know, just because you go one time and maybe that therapist isn't for you,
Oh
keep
yeah,
trying. It's like dating. You know, you're not going to marry somebody after the first date. Well, maybe you do, but um, you know, just keep trying. And therapy is such a crucial part of my journey as well, and a lot of people's journeys, but also music is. And that's why another reason that I'm just so happy that you're here, because I talk about it all the time. I'm a huge music fan. I listen to all different kinds of music. But there are certain moods that I get in, or certain songs, like, certain Bowling for Soup songs. But one of my favorite things in the world, Jaret, is when a punk band does a cover song.
Oh, okay.
So like when you do like Britney Spears' Baby One More Time, or a Pink, you just did a Who Knew the other day, and that just like there's just something about that it's just like fun, and it just makes you. But then there's also the songs like Turbulence, or I mean, you did and I think you kind of put it on hold now, but your country. You went country for a little bit, and you had I think it's There Is You.
Yeah.
And that song was just so like you're here for a reason.
Yeah.
Stay here.
I really oh man. Whew. Yeah. I think so too. It's funny. I wouldn't say I'm a religious person, but I'm a spiritual person. I have faith. It's not something that I talk about ever, but I do believe that, things happen for a reason. I do believe that we are put on the planet for a certain reason. And I do think that mental health and the struggles for which I went through so that I could be able to be an advocate for people who just can't quite get over that hump and be an advocate for themselves, internally and externally. I think that is my purpose, and which goes back to the first of this interview where I literally said to the people who control the internet, tell them not to ask me about this, and now it's just like people will still tiptoe into it, not because they're instructed. It's just because, it's a weird thing. It's like, can I ask you about this? And I'm always like, you can ask me about anything. You know what I mean? And obviously I like to talk. If I don't want to answer the question, I'll just steer around it and go do something else. But yeah, so music is magical, Jen. It is magical in such a way that it's the only thing in the world that can make you see, hear, smell, and truly feel something just by audibly hearing it. Like if you think about I'll just give you my example. When I hear The Real Thing by Faith No More, to this day, I can feel the summer of 1989 in my truck with the windows down and me and my buddy Scott going to Sonic and then going over to this girl's house who's babysitting these kids. But we're allowed to go swim in the pool. And, and I can feel it. I can smell it, like I can taste that Diet Coke. And, it's such a magical thing. But you're so right about like different music for different moods. And I think that's why you can never say like, this is real off topic, but to me, this is true. You can't ever go, that band sucks, because everything is so subjective. Like despite what you think about that band, I don't like Led Zeppelin, but Led Zeppelin has obviously made people feel a certain way for 50 years, and, but when I left my divorce proceedings, November 13th, 2013 or something like that, I listened to Slayer the whole way home as loud as it could go. And it was both triumphant and sad and weird. But that's what I needed at the time. Sometimes you need Slipknot and sometimes you need Neil Diamond, like it's so cool that you can do that. So I've been really blessed in that I have Bowling for Soup where I can be funny, but still discuss heavy topics. I can talk about anxiety in a way that a lot of artists really wouldn't be able to get away with, just because of how who our band is. But and then the country stuff, I was able to really get into some topics that finding my extended family. Realizing I've got all these brothers and sisters out there that I didn't even know I had. I deal with that in my country stuff. And then There Is You, which sort of sits in the middle. I think it might go on the new Bowling for Soup album in some way or another. But it's a full-on mental health song that, the country producer that Zach Malloy, a great friend of mine, just said, you need to do a song where it's just you and a piano. You don't ever do that, and he was so right. And he was like, what's something, he goes, I feel like you should do a mental health song because that's what's important to you. And so I just literally wrote the lyrics right after we got off the phone and sent it to him. And then he sort of sent me back this musical idea, and I sent it back going, wait, we need to repeat this and repeat this. And it was written in, 10 minutes. And that song has been just such a blessing. I mean, it like Turbulence, it has really helped a lot of people. And, something that I'm really proud of that, and it's not the easiest song in the world to sing because there's a lot that that goes through your head, when you singing a song like that. But yeah, thank you so much for pointing that out. I've been really blessed in that I can do a lot of different kinds of music and different kinds of things and make it make sense in my career. And as you said, I am putting the country thing on hold for a while, after the new year, because Bowling for Soup is just busy again, and that's a real good thing. So we're gonna ride this way while we can, but I certainly will come back to it because lyrically, with the country thing, I don't always have to spin it in such a way to where it helps somebody through a bad day. Sometimes it can exclamate a bad day, country music, and that's what it's there for.
I love it. Speaking of Bowling for Soup and you guys being super busy, you just released a new song, Holding On to That Hate.
Yeah.
What a bop. And I hate that I say that word at 42, but like
No,
I
it's
listened to that and I was like, but the message is so good, but the song you just want to kind of hop
yeah,
around to. And it's so fun, but you'll never find a way to be happy holding on to that hate. And
yeah,
that right now in this world, I think everybody needs to hear that. Like
yeah,
the
yeah. And
release the hate.
I've had people who never say anything about my songs say that, that exact thing to me. Like a producer, one of my best friends is a producer, and I'm pretty open to this. A lot of my friends and we just get it out of the way, and I go, hey, listen, I'm not going to listen to your band. Like, you can send me stuff if you want, and I'll listen to it, but like, it's just not what I listen to, anyway. So, but a really good friend of mine who I know he doesn't ever listen to our stuff. He listens to everything right when it comes out, just so he can hear what we're doing production wise and ask me questions, because he's a big gear kind of nerd. And anyway, that was his exact sentence. He was like, "Oh my God, this is like what the world needs right now." And I've heard that so much. And I think this sort of carries into our conversation that we're having here about mental health and men. And I'm gonna just be real honest for a second. I am not like a big politics guy. I really I don't muddy my head with all of that. I pay attention to what's going on in the world, but I quite frankly don't get caught up in this black and white thing that's happening today, where you have to be either or. And if I'm on this side, then I believe all of this whole list of things. And if I'm on this side, I believe this whole list of things. I just don't, that doesn't compute with me. I don't really understand that. But I some of the things that are happening in the world are upsetting to me. And it's kind of like really the first time where it's really kind of getting to me. And, so it's what I'm having to deal with, and in therapy and these things like that, and so it's a scary time, and so I would imagine that more and more people are starting to feel that, to really just feel like, hey, what's going on? Like there's this helplessness to things, and so yeah, I think music is one of those things that helps, and but it's a real good time to check on those that you love. And that's one of the things that I'm trying to really just, but you said earlier, you said, the thing about it's okay to not be okay. And I have sort of, I realized through just, as I keep up with Punk Rock Saves Lives and my own stuff, and there's a lot of the stuff that I follow on social media that is, mental health related, and that, a lot of times now the people who the rub some dirt on it people kind of come out of the woodwork to just really, sorry if I'm not supposed to cuss, but
Oh,
take
no,
a
good.
shit.
Yeah.
People will just come and take a shit on that now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, it's this, it's nothing but miserable people who just can't understand that that happiness is just, it's right there. You just got to go get it. But instead they'd rather, just be miserable on the internet and be miserable in their jobs and be miserable, on their couch and just be miserable people. And, you know, that's one of the things about the stigma, right? As you start to get into it, now people have been hearing it's okay to not be okay for the last 10, 20 years. And it's become this cliche thing. The problem is exactly what you said. And that is, it's cliche, but it's really the only way you can put it. People need to understand that, you know, feeling helpless sometimes is normal, but feeling helpless, for a month is kind of not,
Right.
like you you need to talk to somebody, you need to get some help. And let's talk about this, let's talk about the fact that what the suicide rate for men is, let's talk about how many men attempt that every year, and how many men won't talk about their feelings and all of that. And when we start to do this, then there's the then there's the trolls from the other side that are then, well, what about women? And you're like, that's not the point.
Right.
Like it's like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Like, you can't be mad at Green Day for being in the Hall of Fame just because Iron Maiden isn't in there. That's not fucking fair. It's not how it works. You know what I mean? You can't take something away from this just because it's happening over here too. We're not saying, oh my God, we need to focus on mental health, men's mental health, and never talk about women's mental health
Right.
again. No, that's not what we're saying. We're saying is, nobody's talking about this. Let's talk about this too.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
just because I do that post, during May or whatever, it doesn't mean that I have just as many females reach out to me on Instagram and say, what's the first step? And I'm like, you just took it.
Yeah.
You sending that message, you just took it. Guess what? Take a deep breath. You're on your way,
Yeah.
but yeah, it gets complicated, doesn't it?
It really does. It really does. And that's why I think it was so important for me to have you on today because again, I talk a lot about women because that's my audience, but most of us have partners or we have a brother or a friend or somebody who is male. I've lost people to suicide, unfortunately, and I want to be there for people the best way I can. But also, I can't be there for somebody else unless I'm okay. So I need to take care of myself first. My
Yeah.
husband, he needs to take care of his self first.
Yeah.
We have to fill our cups first before we can put it together. And I think it's really important to talk about. And I just
You know what my drummer says? Sorry to cut you off, but he
no.
says, you have to think about, this is so simple, but you think about in an airplane, it's ingrained in our heads. When the masks pop out, you put yours on first so that you can help anybody else that needs help, right? It's the simplest analogy I've ever heard, but my God, is it spot on. And that's the first thing you learn if you go to couples counseling. By the way, highly recommended. Whether you're happy, unhappy, whatever, go to couples counseling. You talk about some superpowers and shit. It is amazing, but that's the first thing you learn. You can't be a happy couple, or at least be a couple that's working on happiness, if you're not happy people, or at least working on being happy people. So if you don't know how to show yourself grace, how are you supposed to be able to show your partner grace? You can't. You have to be able to work on you have to work on yourself. And that has to be your priority. It just has to be. And then then you both can get into this pattern of like, okay, well, now we can work on each other, or or at least start to see like, oh man, I'm seeing these changes in you. I'm seeing this. My gosh, you seem so much happier, or or you didn't get mad at this, or you're less quick to snap, or all these things are so helpful in your marriage or in your relationships, not even just friendships, everything. So yeah, I am really big on self-care. Um, and it is another thing that men have trouble doing, you
Mm-hmm.
know, whether it's, you know, make yourself go play golf with your friends, if that's your happy place, go get a massage, there's go watch a football game on Sunday, with your best friend instead of at the house while you're trying to keep, you know what I mean? Like, and communicate that that's a need that you have, and, I will say that I try not to ever separate the two, but I think, for the most part, we're all terrible at self-care until we figure it out. Right. But men are the worst. Like,
Oh,
just,
100%. I
just,
could I couldn't agree with you more on that. I
yeah,
really couldn't, because I've seen it all my life.
yeah,
Whether it was my father, my stepfather, my husband, my son, and I love it. I think it's super important. Um, I know that you're a very busy man, and I just want to thank you so much for being here. But before you go, I have a
yeah.
few things to chat
Okay.
with you about.
Okay.
Number one, Bowling for Soup is about to play somewhere huge December 13th.
That's right. Yeah. Our biggest headline show in our career, 31 years in. Um, Pretty wild. We've been on as I said, I'm putting country on the back burner because not only pop punk in general, but you know, Bowling for Soup is on quite an upswing, and yeah, we're headlining Wembley Arena December 13th in the UK. I'm very excited about it. It's funny because I'm so I'm so lucky to be doing what I do, and I don't really have a bucket list because I feel like I've already accomplished. I feel like it would be selfish at this point. Like I and I'm being really, really honest about this. We don't even really go to new countries and stuff because we're like, we've sort of done everything that you know what I mean? Like, as far as like, what else are we going to accomplish? And then, something like this comes up and I'm like, okay, I'm going to be honest. This is a real big deal. and, so yeah, we're really excited about it. And, it's going to be fun. I think most of our families are going to be there, and it's going to be certainly a big night and a big celebration of Bowling for Soup and our relationship with the UK, who's been so great to us, but just, really where the band is right now, and, you know, uh, just exciting times.
That's so awesome. I'm so happy for you. But not
Thank you.
only are you the lead singer of Bowling for Soup, you're also the lead singer for this amazing band called Love Handle.
Yeah.
Um, and I will say, when we were at Four Chords, we made sure to record Phineas and Ferb theme song because, kids. And you
Yeah.
even said right before that, guys, get out your phones because I'm not restarting the song.
Oh, did I do that?
You
Oh,
did.
that's funny because I don't. I used to do that bit all the time, and I kind of stopped because I do have I will kind of milk it and lead into it a little bit or whatever. But yeah, that used to be the one where you just see people just. I get it on that one. It's like you want to be able to show your kids who aren't there or whatever, and yeah, it's just such a I've been involved with Phineas and Ferb since the beginning. I got that meeting to do the theme song, and that ended up me being hired to rewrite the theme song into a 3.5 minute song, and then I got to audition for a part on the show, and it's funny, I auditioned to be the drummer for Love Handle, but I got cast as the singer, and then I just did a video about this on my TikTok the other day. The drummer is actually Steve Zahn, who
Mhm.
is in, Saving Silverman and That Thing You Do and some of my favorite movies. And so that's that, there's cool things that come about from being involved in stuff like that. And that's definitely one of them. But what a blessing. I mean, the show is back, and my character is back. And I'm just thrilled about the success of that. I couldn't be more thrilled really for another thing that I preach all the time, you just want to see your friends win,
Hmm.
and root for everybody. It's like, I think that gets into my mental health rants sometimes when you're upset with everybody around you for these successes. Bands are famous for this. You just, well, this band's getting this and this, why are they getting this and we're not getting this? And it's like, you can't base your life on what other people get, because just because they got it, if they wouldn't have, doesn't mean you would have. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
just stop it and root for everybody. But the creators of that show are just they're just such great dudes, and it's just so cool to see them win and to see them back and winning again. So they're a ray of sunshine in my life, and whenever I get the chance to see them or to celebrate in any way, I'm always really happy about that.
I love that. One thing that I learned about you while researching is that you and I have a common bond because my first job in high school was Chuck E. Cheese.
I
So
knew you were
I
going to say that.
was Chucky, but I was the full head on with the Lysol in there, cleaning it before anybody else got it.
Yeah.
But you're the voice of Chuck E. Cheese.
It's funny that you say that about the suit, because I am 18 years older than my wife. And when we met, she was 22 and I was 40. And again, it was it was just, it's a great love story, because as you said earlier, she didn't even like me at first. She thought I was cute, but I'm not, I wasn't overly animated or nice or, whatever, for whatever reason. But, we did find one another, and so her stepmom, we were visiting over there, and I guess I was outside or something, and her stepmom came up and said, listen, to Casey, hey, I get it. The age difference, it doesn't really bug us, whatever I mean, but he works at Chuck E. Cheese. And Casey's like, 40-year-old man that just works at Chuck E. Cheese or whatever, which but not even as the manager thinks I have the suit on, you know what I mean? And Casey goes, no, he is Chuck E. Cheese. And so, but yeah, gosh, I guess it's going on like 15 years now. And so really, the way you tell if it's me is, since he's been the small little cute guy with the guitar and stuff, it's been me. So yeah, that's a really fun job that there's a huge bit of nostalgia to it that just makes me so happy, because I was a big Chuck E. Cheese guy when I was a kid. So
Yeah.
I
Back in the
love.
what? Showbiz Pizza, right? Is that what it
That's
was?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We had Showbiz in Wichita Falls where I lived, and then my grandmother had Chuck E. Cheese where she lived. So I had the best of both worlds.
That's awesome. And one more thing we have in common is, and I want to know how you got to this place, but we're Steelers fans, right? You took your family to the Steelers game.
I did.
I'm in Pittsburgh, and you're a Steelers fan, but you live in Texas.
Lived in Texas my whole life. My dad grew up in Pittsburgh
Okay.
and moved down here when he joined the Army. And so his family was all still in Pittsburgh. So from the time I can remember, our Christmas presents were like Steelers scarves and Steelers jerseys and things like that. And, as I said, I'm 53. So in the 70s, by the time I could pay attention to football, we were winning every Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I was a Steelers fan as a kid. And then, once I found music, I really wasn't into sports anymore. I kind of took a break. And then as an adult, touring around, we started to kind of like watch sports again and started to watch football. And my love for the Steelers amped right back up where it was. And now I have an entire shrine. My wife gives me the upstairs of the house, the game room area. And so it's all, Jack Lambert jerseys and tons of Steelers memorabilia. And I try to go to one game a year. And this year, yeah, I took all three kids and my wife, and we just had a blast. And of course, I am bad luck. For some reason, the last 3 games I've gone to, we've lost. So I might need to take a year off.
I love it. Jaret, thank you so much for being here. Before you leave, if there is that one woman out there or that man who's listening, because I do have a few male listeners who just needs to know where to go. I'm gonna link you in our show notes, but also Punk Rock Saves Lives. What's the first step for them?
First step is talking to somebody. the first step is realizing that getting help isn't showing weakness, it's showing a strength. That you being able to go, hey, I need to talk to somebody, I need some help, is so brave and something that not everybody can do. And rest assured, I don't sit and think that everybody is suicidal. Like, that's a whole nother level. We didn't even talk about that. It's not really. I wasn't ever really, so it's not my experience. I've lived through it, and it's the worst thing in the world, right? But even just not being able to figure out your cloudy head, this pit in your stomach, like all of this, like once it starts affecting your life, the best thing you can do is ask for help. And so I always say, reach out to a friend, reach out to a family member, whatever, just talk through it. But talk to your medical doctor, your GP, 100%. That's a great place to start. And then if, and see what they say, but you can start looking for counselors. As Jen said, just like there's no magic pill, there's no magic connection. And I know that finding counseling is hard, especially without insurance right now, or even with insurance now, because most of them won't take it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I know that it gets confusing because a lot of them are religious based and all of that. It's not easy, but there are things like BetterHelp, and for musicians, a thing called Backstage, where you can get that ball started, remotely. And but yeah, I would just say the first step is just getting it out there, just like, hey, I need some help, I need a friend, and man, you will just feel so much better once you start.
Agreed. Jaret, I can't thank you enough. We're really, really grateful to have you on this earth and to have you make us laugh and make us think and make us know that we're okay. So I really appreciate you being here, and we can't wait to see you crush it.
Well, I am honored to be your first male guest. I would. I have a podcast called Rockstar Dad Show, and we have now had 2 female guests. But I would love for you to come on our show and let's talk about blended families.
I love that.
And because it's such a great, we have so many dads out there that are shared custody dads. And then, and from what it's like from the mom's perspective, it's a complicated navigation for you too. And just as much as the stresses of him that he has, or whatever, whether you get along with the ex-spouse or not, doesn't matter, because it's still stressful,
Yeah.
And so anyway, let's ping pong. You come talk to us sometime.
That'd be awesome. Thank you, Jaret.
Thank
We'll
you.
see you soon.
All right.
Can I tell you how much fun that conversation was for me? If you're watching it on YouTube, you saw me, but I was smiling the whole time. And even when it got deep, talking to Jaret was like talking to a friend that I've known for years. He's so relatable, and it just goes to show you that it doesn't matter if you're a rock star or a single dad or a stay-at-home mom. We can all have mental health issues, right? We can all go down deep paths, and it's okay not to be okay, but seek help. It's out there. For the midlife women, my listeners, I know that we go through it. Perimenopause and menopause suck, and our hormones are all over the place, and our emotions are too, right? Up and down and angry and sad and depressed and all of the things. And I talk about it all the time, how we need to make sure that we're okay to help other people be okay. But we also need to make sure that we check in on the men in our life, because, I know that not all of us are as vocal as I am about my mental health issues, but I feel like men are less vocal than even that. I mean, they suffer in silence sometimes. So whether it's your partner or a brother or your dad or a son or a nephew or just a friend, check in with the men in your life. Make sure they're okay. Be that 80% when they can only be 20. I heard something at a conference this week about why some marriages last so long. And the gentleman was talking, and he said, it's because we never gave up on the same day. So don't give up on the same day. Whether it's a partnership that you're in, or just being a good friend or sister or mother, or whatever aspect that relationship is, make sure you check in on them. Make sure to check out Bowling for Soup's new song and their new live album they're putting out. Check out Jaret's work with Punk Rock Saves Lives and his podcast, the Rockstar Dad Show, who he hosts with his bandmate Gary Wiseman. And as you heard, he invited me to be on the podcast, so I'll be joining him soon. And I'll share all the details when I'm joining him. But we're going to talk about things like midlife mental health, but also blended families and how tough that can be sometimes too. I'm so excited to continue to bring these amazing guests to you. I'm so grateful for you to be here and listen to my podcast. Make sure that you like and subscribe. Leave me a 5-star review because that gets other people listening too that might need to hear it. And sign up for my newsletter, which will come out this week. I'm so thankful for you being here. You're here. You matter. You need to be here. If you need help, reach out. Jen at themidlifeeditco.com. Hit me up on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all the social media. And until next time, I'm Jen Weinstein, and this is the Midlife Edit Podcast. Thanks for being part of the Midlife Comeback Tour. We're going to make it a movement. Now go make a damn good chapter.